On the night of September 30th, 1938, in a government building in Munich, 4 men sat around a table convinced they had saved Europe from war. They were not dreamers. They were leaders carrying the memories of trenches, gas, and mass graves. They believed that if you gave a dictator what he demanded just this once, history might finally choose mercy. And for a moment, it looked like it worked. When Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned to London, he held up a piece of paper and declared, "Peace for our time." Europe exhaled. Less than 1 year later, German troops crossed into Poland. World War II began. So here's the real question. How does a continent go from relief to catastrophe in under 12 months? World War II did not begin with gunfire. It began with a slow collapse of trust, of institutions, and of the idea that peace could survive without consequences. This is not the story of a single man. It is the story of a system that failed step by step, while millions watched, hoped, and waited. In 1919, Europe was shattered. The First World War had killed millions of soldiers and civilians, an industrial slaughter on a scale the world had never seen. The Western Front became a machine that consumed men even when nothing important was happening. On July 1st, 1916, the first day of the Battle of the Somme, the British Army suffered more than 57,000 casualties in a single day. Imagine the scale of that grief, compressed into a few hours. At Verdun, over months of fighting, the casualties climbed into the hundreds of thousands, an event that scarred French national memory like a permanent wound. After the war, Europe's leaders tried to design a peace strong enough to prevent another one. They wrote treaties, they drew borders, they demanded reparations, they imposed restrictions, and at Versailles, they made a bet. That humiliation could produce stability. The Treaty of Versailles restricted Germany's military. An army limited to 100,000 men, the general staff eliminated, and bans on weapons like tanks, submarines, and military aircraft. For France, these were safeguards. France had been invaded twice in less than 50 years. French leaders wanted a Germany that could not return to the Rhine with an army. For Britain, it was a balance. Punishment, yes, but not so much that Europe would collapse. For Germany, it was something else. Not just defeat, a public, permanent mark of shame. In the years that followed, you can see the pattern of the 20th century being written in slow motion. A fragile democracy, a wounded society, and institutions built for peace that could not handle the kind of chaos coming next. By 1923, Germany's economy did something terrifying. It stopped being real. This was the era of Weimar hyperinflation. Prices rose not by the week, but by the hour. The government printed million-mark notes, then billion-mark notes, and by November 1923, $1 US was worth 1 trillion marks. People carried cash in bundles and wheelbarrows because paper became easier to transport than value. Savings evaporated, pensions dissolved. The middle class, people who believed in rules, in order, in tomorrow, watched their future disappear without a single gunshot. Hyperinflation wasn't only an economic disaster, it was psychological destruction. Because when money stops meaning something, everything else starts to wobble too. Contracts, promises, the idea that the system is fair, and once trust disappears, people begin to search for certainty anywhere. Sometimes that certainty comes from a strong institution. Sometimes it comes from a strong man. Even in the 1920s, the warning was visible. A society can survive poverty, but it struggles to survive humiliation. It struggles to survive chaos. It struggles to survive the feeling that the future has been stolen. In 1929, the global economy collapsed. The Great Depression became a worldwide downturn that lasted through much of the 1930s. This wasn't only about stocks and banks. It was about fear spreading faster than facts. In the United States, the Depression left people hungry and desperate. Bread lines forming in major cities, families losing homes, dignity shrinking into silence. In Germany, the crisis hit like a second war. Unemployment surged, reaching 6 million by the winter of 1932. Industry ran far below capacity. 6 million unemployed is not a statistic. It's a street full of men with nowhere to go. It's families eating less so children can eat it all. It's veterans who were trained to obey, now abandoned by the state that trained them. It's anger, quiet at first, then louder. Here's the key. The Great Depression did not invent extremism. It revealed it. Democracy could not feed people, and hunger does not wait for elections. So extremists did not begin by promising war. They began by promising order. If you want to understand the 1930s, you need to understand one powerful human truth. When people lose control over their lives, they will trade freedom for stability. In the United States, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal created programs that put people to work. One of them, the WPA, Works Progress Administration, funded jobs, construction, and training programs. Films like We Work Again were produced to document and promote this effort. The message was simple. Work restores dignity. Dignity restores hope. Hope restores society. And that was true, up to a point. But here's the dangerous lesson governments also learned. Work can restore order, and order can become obedience. In Germany, unemployment and humiliation created a population primed for discipline. Not everyone wanted violence. Most people wanted normal life, a paycheck, a future. And when a political movement promises to end chaos, it doesn't need to convince the public to hate. It needs to convince them to obey. Propaganda is often misunderstood. People imagine it as a magic spell that instantly turns ordinary citizens into monsters. But propaganda works slower than that. Propaganda teaches a society what to ignore. It teaches people who deserves empathy and who does not. It teaches what questions are dangerous, and it teaches obedience as a virtue. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi Germany's propaganda minister, understood mass communication as a weapon. Radios became common household objects. Messages were repeated endlessly. Authority replaced doubt. A modern viewer might ask, how could people believe this? But the more honest question is, how did they learn to stop questioning it? Because when a nation is traumatized by war, inflation, unemployment, people don't want more uncertainty. They want a story that explains their pain. They want an enemy that makes the world simple. They want leaders who sound sure. And the most dangerous thing about certainty is that it feels like safety. Now zoom out. Because the road to World War II wasn't only Germany. It was the global system of the 1930s cracking one crisis at a time. The League of Nations was created after World War I to prevent another war. But it had a fatal weakness. It could condemn, it could investigate, it could issue statements, but it could not enforce peace with power. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. The League appointed the Lytton Commission to investigate. The Commission's conclusions were adopted by the League, Japan rejected them, and then Japan withdrew from the League. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia. The League condemned the invasion and voted for economic sanctions. But the sanctions were ineffective due to lack of support from major powers. So what did the world learn? Aggression worked. Rules were negotiable. And if you moved fast enough, the global system could be too slow to stop you. This is how peace dies in the real world, not in one dramatic collapse, but in a series of moments where everyone says, "This isn't our problem. Not today. Not worth a war." In March 1936, Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland, sending German forces into a region that treaties had declared demilitarized. This was not a hidden move. It was a public test, a gamble, a message to Europe. Your rules are only real if you enforce them. France and Britain did not respond militarily. The world avoided a confrontation, and Hitler learned a lesson that would shape everything that followed. He could take risks, and the cost would be paid by someone else. This is not a moral lecture, it's a mechanism, because once the system shows it will not respond, it invites the next violation. To understand appeasement, you cannot treat it as cowardice. You have to treat it as trauma. Britain and France were not eager to fight. They were still haunted. At the Somme and Verdun, entire generations were scarred, physically, emotionally, politically. Peace was not weakness. For many leaders, peace was survival. So when Hitler moved, the first instinct was not fight. It was delay. Delay meant hope. Hope that Germany could be satisfied. Hope that the world could avoid another funeral continent. But delay also gave Hitler something priceless. Time. Time to rearm. Time to plan. Time to normalize the idea that treaties were optional. In March 1938, Germany annexed Austria, the Anschluss. This wasn't a small event, it was proof. Proof that Germany's expansion was not theoretical, and still, Europe did not respond with force. Then came the Sudeten crisis, German demands over Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland. And this brings us back to Munich. In late September 1938, Hitler, Chamberlain, Daladier, and Mussolini met in Munich. The agreement allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland. From the view of many in Britain and France, it was a painful compromise to prevent war. But from Hitler's view, it was something else. Confirmation that threats worked. After Munich, many Europeans wanted to believe the crisis was over. But dictators rarely stop because they have been rewarded. They stop when the risk becomes real. And in 1939, the risk still didn't feel real enough. Germany moved again, pressing deeper into Czechoslovakia, proving that Munich had not solved anything. A system that rewards aggression does not create peace. It creates appetite. At this point, even those who had believed in compromise began to understand. There would be no final concession, because the demands were not about territory, they were about power. By 1939, Europe's remaining options were narrowing. Poland was next in the line of pressure. Danzig was demanded. Corridors were debated. Diplomats searched for a solution that would not trigger war. But the system had already trained Hitler to believe that war was avoidable for him, because everyone else feared it more. Then, in August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, accompanied by a secret protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, including the partitioning of Poland along a defined line of rivers. This was the moment the world should have heard clearly. The order built after World War I was finished. A war could begin and spread without fear of a unified response. The last restraints were gone. At dawn on September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. The invasion marked the start of World War II. Soon after, the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein fired on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte near Gdansk, one of the first iconic acts of the war. You can read the timelines, you can count the divisions, you can study the maps. But to understand what that morning meant, imagine this: a family waking to the sound of windows rattling, a child seeing adults move too quickly, a city realizing the rules no longer exist, a decade of fear finally crystallizing into one truth: war is here. So was World War II inevitable? Not in the sense that it was fate. Inevitable does not mean magical. It means mechanical. It means the system was built in a way that made disaster likely. Think of it like a bridge under growing stress. Each crisis adds weight. Each concession removes support. Each failure to enforce rules weakens the structure. And then one day the collapse looks sudden, but only because people stopped watching the cracks. The war did not begin because no one saw it coming. The war began because stopping it required costs that leaders refused to pay, until the costs became infinite. Now here's the hardest part of this story. Most people did not wake up wanting war. They wanted stability. They wanted a normal life. They wanted their children to be safe. They wanted bread, jobs, dignity, and they wanted to believe tomorrow could be better than yesterday. That desire is not evil. It is human. But it creates a vulnerability. If a leader promises stability at any price, some people will pay it. If an institution promises peace without strength, it becomes a performance. If a society decides that truth is too exhausting, propaganda wins by default. And if the world watches aggression and responds with statements, not action, aggression becomes rational. World War II was not inevitable because of one man. It was inevitable because institutions failed, because fear replaced responsibility, because silence replaced action, because the world convinced itself that peace could survive without consequences. History does not repeat itself exactly, but human behavior does. And if you want to understand the future, you have to listen carefully to the sound that comes before gunfire, not the explosions, the silence. If you want the next episode, we'll continue from here, because once the war begins, the world changes forever. Economies, psychology, and the hidden machines of power behind every battlefield. Subscribe if you want documentary stories told with facts, context, and the human side of history. Because history isn't just what happened, it's what people believed right before it happened.